Thank you, folks. That's Mike Herzog on the 5-string banjo there. Thank you so much. A little tour of the Grand Ole Opry. So now an interesting thing happened around that time, the mid to late 1950s. The blues players out of the Delta, the Tidewaters, Mississippi and all those places, they didn't get a lot of attention on radio because of, well, you know, the prejudice back then, and that's a shame because there were great blues players back in that era, and there were guys that evolved like Robert Johnson and all these guys that influenced so many young musicians that became part of the British invasion and the American rock and roll scene. But there was one guy who always took a chance and recorded some of those gospel songs and those blues songs and those rock and roll songs, and that guy's name was Sam Phillips at Sun Records. So while Nashville was doing its thing and the Grand Ole Opry was developing, Sam Phillips was taking a chance on some young men that he found that could sing the black blues songs and the black rock and roll songs from that culture, but they could do them with the sensibility that would attract record buyers from average folks around America and in the mountains and stuff like that. And that earliest style, as it bridged from country music, from the old Delta blues, into what eventually evolved into rock and roll and truly spread around the world. Remember, we started with the Irish Celtic roots in the Appalachian Mountains. That style was called rockabilly music. And now we're going to take you to the seminal moment on the Grand Ole Opry when rockabilly was first introduced to the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. So I already told you that Hank Williams Sr. was kicked off of the Grand Ole Opry and he was never asked back. Another guy that was kicked off the Grand Ole Opry and was never asked back was Johnny Cash, and we'll get to Johnny Cash in just a little bit. No, Johnny was eventually asked back because he redeemed himself by helping souls by playing places like Folsom Prison and stuff like that. But the third guy that was kicked off the Grand Ole Opry and truly was never asked back because of the way he gyrated and sang this rockabilly music that was scary to some folks. They thought sure as heck that was the mark of the devil, and everybody that played it was going under real fast, and that was Elvis Presley, believe it or not. But before that happened on the Opry, there was one night on the Grand Ole Opry where Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass music, was smart enough and savvy enough to have heard some of the early recordings of Elvis Presley. He saw the charm of Elvis Presley, he saw the aura and the connection he made with the audiences, and Bill Monroe had an early hit. He sold thousands of records. Now back then, thousands of records was a lot of records. He sold thousands of records of a song called Blue Moon of Kentucky. So we'd first like to play it for you Bill Monroe style, which is what everybody on the Opry came to see Bill sing. This was one of his highlight songs, a nice slow melody about love gone wrong. And then we're gonna switch to the night. Bill Monroe introduced this young man from Memphis, Tennessee, who got ahead and played his rockabilly style of Bill Monroe's hit. Now the problem was the audience was so shocked by the rhythms that they heard, that they complained, they didn't applaud when he was done, and they promptly kicked Elvis off of the Opry. Now there you go, that's the true story of that. So we're gonna put both of those moments together now as we go back in time in the late 1950s here in the Grand Ole Opry. Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys. Thank you for coming this evening. The Bluegrass Boys are just as pleased as can be to play this hit song. We thank you for buying our records. I'd like to sing this one for everybody from our home state of Kentucky. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the ones God proved untrue. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the ones gone left me blue. It's a night when the stars shine bright. Whisper from on high up, said goodbye. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone, say goodbye. Let's have a little fiddle there, Monroe style. Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone and left me blue. It was a moonlight night when the stars shining bright. They whispered on high, your love said goodbye. Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gone, left me blue. And then came a few nights later on the Grand Ole Opry. Ladies and gentlemen, said Mr. Roy Acuff, Bill Monroe's coming out here tonight to introduce you to a special act. And Bill Monroe strolled out on the Ryman Auditorium stage and he said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so glad you're here from all the different states. Anybody here from Tennessee? Yeah, all right, good to see you all folks out there. We got a young man tonight. He's a fine young man. I've been following his career, and I'm most excited to say that he has decided at his record company to record one of my songs. You all know Blue Moon of Kentucky, right? And everybody would cheer and carry on. Well, this fine young man right here, he's got his own band, and he's going to come out right now, and he's going to sing for you his own version of the Blue Moon of Kentucky. And I hope you enjoy it just fine. And if you do, well, that's good, because that's going to sell me a couple more records, and we appreciate it very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. Elvis Presley and his band. And out came this young guy, which I'm not an impersonator, okay, but here he came. Well, I said, we know, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gonna let me blue. I said, we know, keep on shining. Shine on the one that's gonna let me blue. Well, it was on a moonlight night when the stars shining bright. You whispered on high, said your love, said goodbye. I said, blue moon love, I can't take you, won't you keep on shining, 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 shining bright, shining on the one that's gonna let me blue. Don't catch you! It was on a moonlight night with the stars shining bright. You whispered on high, my love, say goodbye. Yeah, the blue love, keep on shining, shine on the one that's gonna let me blue. I say, shine on the one that's gonna let me blue. Thank you. You're much kinder than the audience was to Elvis at the Grand Ole Opry that fateful night. Elvis got kicked off. However, all the young kids heard about that. And what do young kids do when they find out there's something their parents don't especially like? Why, that's the next big thing for kids. And Elvis sold a lot of records, tens of thousands of records, more than anybody else on that song. And guess who collected a big portion of the royalties checks? Mr. Bill Monroe. So he and Elvis were always friends.